Hello and welcome to another episode of Mews R&D podcast. Today with Ryan, VP of Engineering for Platform, and Conor, VP of Engineering for Product. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
And maybe tell us what it is that differs you in terms of the VP role.
Okay, there's lots of things that make us different, but in terms of Mews and engineering, you can think of my role as anything that a customer, that a guest, or that a partner is interacting with. So the software that anybody on the outside of the Mews world is interacting with is ultimately built by one of my teams. So we're all about building for the end user outside of Mews.
Yeah. And behind that, underpinning everything that those folks build is our platforms. So in many ways, Conor and his teams are our customers. So that's everything on a cloud infrastructure. That's all of the data platform. And yeah, we very much see the product engineering as our customer.
So something that nobody sees, but it's very important to keep the lights on, let's say.
100%. And we still try and remain close to the customer, the external customer as well. But yeah, we're making sure that there's high stability, high scalability, and that those folks have the best experience, the developers have the best experience to build the best products for our customers.
And was that always kind of in your path that you would go for the more customer focused role and you will be more for the, let's say, tech behind the scenes role?
For me, probably yes. I love working on things where I can see real world impact on a person and being able to kind of understand out in the real world what the work I'm doing or my teams are doing is enabling for people in the world. So I love that kind of much more thinking about the kind of end user and the real world. And I love the technology, absolutely love the platform side of things, but I get my kicks more on the product-facing piece.
And I think there is a really nice example. If you remember, our CEO, Matt, recently shared this story of us actually helping waiters to earn more. So can you tell us a little bit on that?
It's one of my highlights absolutely for this year. So one of our products is a POS system for restaurants. And we recently revamped the tipping interface. So when you're paying your bill, making it much easier, much more pleasant experience to add a tip to that bill. And in the time that we've rolled it out, there's been a 180% increase in the tips that are being given to servers in restaurants. And for me, that's mind-blowing, right? Because that's not just, some shareholder somewhere is making money. That's a real person who's able to, afford something for themselves or for their family as a result of the work that we're doing. It's those sort of things that light me up.
So what lights you up?
Yeah. Well, my background is actually in both. So building products and leading product development as well as platforms. And I love that side of it as well. But I think what's interesting, and you're seeing it more in the community now, is platform is seen as a differentiator, where historically it was, let's keep the lights on. As long as it's up, that's fine. But what we're realizing more is that actually if you build a platform that enables teams to move even faster, you can deliver better and higher quality and faster products for the customer. And I think that's what I love about it. That's the challenge, right? Is to elevate the teams so they're not just the people behind the scenes who keep the lights on. But if you can show the value, if you build this in a certain way, we can really drive faster value and we can outperform the competition. So I love the challenge of being kind of in the background and trying to elevate that. And if you think of things like security, everybody should care about security, right? It shouldn't just be security is something that's done on the side. The whole business should care about security because our customers do.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying as well that those outcomes that my teams are able to achieve, they're not possible. They don't happen without the work of Ryan's teams behind the scenes as well. So there's an element of I love being really, really close to it, but what I do isn't possible without a great platform team.
And maybe just again to kind of build on that, there's also this shared responsibility. So the idea that, for example, this is my world and this is Conor's world. It doesn't actually work like that. If you think of security, right, there's a big responsibility for us, but for the product teams as well to build secure software. So we really think about it of this shared responsibility. And the idea, again, the kind of DevOps model that Conor's teams write the code and write the features and then we ship it and we keep it up. Like, we're totally changing the game for that at Mews, to the point where the product teams will own and run their own infrastructure. It's a big transition that we're going through. But my point here is, like, it's a kind of level of blur between the responsibilities for our teams.
Yeah, it's actually very common at Mews, the level of blurring lines between all sorts of roles. And it's one of the things I really love about a company at this stage. It's that I don't have my box that I need to sit in. I can work really closely with Ryan, and there is that blur and that overlap in what we do. But even on the product management side of things and the product design side of things, like, I'm actively encouraged to have a voice, to have an opinion, to voice that opinion, to raise that opinion, so on. Like, so it's that sort of environment that, like, makes it a really, really exciting place to work.
I don't know if you noticed that, but before we came here, I asked Ryan and Conor to really disagree with each other. So it looks like you didn't get the memo.
We can do that.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you like to be. By the way, if you hear noise, that's probably my Christmas bells.
Your jingle bells.
Yes, my jingle bells. So it's not damage to your hearing. But you touched on that you love working for a company of this size.
Yep.
And you both come from way bigger companies. Obviously, you worked in smaller ones. So maybe tell us a little bit about your professional background and why did you choose Mews? And then the last question to this, where do you see Mews now? Is it a big company? Is it a small company? What are we?
So like, it's a case of perspective, right? For certain people and certain companies, Mews must look absolutely enormous. For other companies, Mews must look tiny. And I've been lucky to work at, like, all ends of that scale. So I've had my own startup. I've worked in companies of, like, 3 or 4 people. And then I've worked in companies like IBM and Verizon, literally hundreds of thousands of people at enormous scale. So Mews is, like, to me, it's still on the lower end. And it's that lower end of, like, we're still able to move very fast. And that's very attractive to me. But it's also at this size, we're big enough that actually the work that we do can have massive impact and have massive impact very quickly. So I love startups. And like I said, I've had my own startup in the past. I've worked for startups. And I love the impact that you can have on the day-to-day basis. But actually the scale of that impact on the real world is much smaller. It takes a lot longer to actually get to massive impact, right? Like, so in Mews, like, the work we do every single day is impacting millions of people, right? Millions of people who are traveling, staying in hotels, staying or eating in restaurants and so on, right? So we're still small enough that you can have a very quick impact in the job, but then see that at scale. As companies get bigger and bigger, I'm less interested in, going back and working for an IBM or a Verizon. There's a lot of benefits to companies like that, but you don't get that impact and that speed that you get at a company like Mews.
And what's your engineering background?
Oh, engineering. I've kind of done everything. So I've spent time as a Java developer, .NET developer. I spent a lot of time working on databases, which I was really, really passionate about. I built my startup actually in the mobile world. So way back in 2008 when the App Store first launched, I launched my first app in the November. So the App Store launched that summer. So a couple of months later, I launched my first app, which actually got really successful. I was able to pack in my job. At the time, I was working as a .NET contractor, so I was able to pack that in and go full-time on building mobile apps, and ended up building, like, for some of the biggest brands in the world and some of, like, the most popular apps in the world at the time as well. So a bit of everything. And what I love about that as well is, like, I will work on a mobile app for the iPhone or a mobile app for Android. I'll also be building a serverless architecture. I'll also be building a NoSQL database behind it as well, and going completely end to end.
What about you?
So in terms of size of companies I've worked on, worked for companies of 130,000 people. I worked at Salesforce, which was about 33,000, and I've worked in the 3 and 4 people. I think Mews is my sweet spot. Similar to, I was at OpenTable good 10 years ago now, and it was a similar situation, rapid growth, which I absolutely love because growth is, like, really hard, scaling teams, scaling processes, and trying to do that without adding bureaucracy and trying to slow down, which I think Mews does a fantastic job of. So I've had a broad range, but this really is kind of my sweet spot. in terms of background, I was a .NET engineer for a long time, building systems, building distributed systems, and that was the thing that I loved. And I was one of these accidental managers. So I was kind of moved into a management role because, I was a strong .NET engineer and I was leading projects. I was like, okay, you can manage these teams. And then I soon found that I was a terrible manager and not spending much time coding. And over time, that kind of shifted. I kind of started to think, actually, I can be a multiplier. I can really drive value for the business through other people. And then I started to think of management and how I improve, similar to how I did with code. I would kind of try and debug humans and, why is this not working? What am I doing? Why I got a lot of feedback that I wasn't a great manager at that time. I was like, okay, what am I doing wrong? So I spent a lot of time, as I had previously done, trying to learn how to be a good software developer, invested all that time to trying to be a good manager and leader. And then obviously once you start managing managers, it's a whole different game.
Have you looked, or how often maybe do you look? And that's also maybe something for anyone to hear, how much a VP is close to actually the code. So have you seen our code?
Yeah. In my first week, I built the application, ran the application, but on a day-to-day basis, absolutely nowhere near the code. I would love to, but it would probably not be great for Mews if that's what I was if that's what I was doing.
How about you?
Yeah, similar. I mean, I'm somewhat kind of more abstract I'm much closer in terms of the architecture and the future systems that we're building here at Mews. But yeah, I've got the code running locally, but I haven't built any features or so on. But I think we remain pretty close to the teams to understand the architecture, how it's evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. Outside of Mews, I still code quite a lot and get my kicks that way. But maybe we should build a little Easter egg into the platform.
We probably should.
Who's got the smarter home?
Probably Conor.
Yeah, I was hoping we'd have something to disagree about, but definitely me.
So what's the weirdest thing you have automated?
Automated.
Well, I know one very weird thing that you have automated, which is your bottle.
Yeah, that's true. I have a smart water bottle. And I think I'm infectious, actually, because one of the guys in the team showed up to work yesterday with a smart water bottle as well. But it's incredible. It seems silly at first. Ironically, a smart water bottle seems silly, but it plugs into your health data, it plugs into the weather and so on. So based on the weather, based on how much exercise you've done, based on the data coming off your watch and stuff, it tells you how much water you should be drinking and the times that you should be drinking during the day as well, which is...
Even the second look to me sounds pretty silly, but... Yeah. Anything you have... I know you do a little bit of DIY, like you did your background, right? So maybe a little bit hands-on.
That's right. Yeah, so my dad's a carpenter, so I like to spend a lot of time with him. I've got all the tools. I can't use them all, but I've got all the tools. But yeah, I love woodwork. I'm into gardening, things like that. So I spend a lot of time building things and working with my dad in the garden, things like that. I think generally because of being a software engineer, a lot of people have this tendency just to want to build things, whether it's with smart home automation or, things like that. It's just, I'll get an obsession and then kind of move on to the next obsession. But I just love building anything, really.
Are you good at it, though?
Not really.
No.
It tends to be like I start a job and then my dad will kind of take it on and finish it off. But I try. So.
The most I do is building IKEA furniture, which I love. I really, really enjoy that. But you kind of can't go wrong.
Yeah,
you can. Oh my God. I have gone so many times wrong, and you have to kind of deassemble it because you missed one part where they said that these should be on that side and you put them on the other side. So I'm not very good. I kind of enjoy it as well, but I'm very, very bad. You are both approximately the same time in Mews, about 2 years, I believe, right?
Just on 2 years.
Congratulations.
I think you're a month before me.
Yeah.
So what led you to Mews? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, you probably never heard of Mews before we approached you, because I
approached Mews.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at the time I was looking for a new role, and there was certain things that I really wanted to do. One was kind of get involved in the travel space. So I used to work in a small Irish startup that built apps for the travel industry, and I loved the industry. I loved getting to travel, experience new places, and learning about it. It's an incredibly complex industry. So I came across Mews and hospitality and travel. They're hand in hand. So it was straight away. There's an industry I really like. And as I read about the company and went on the website and went on the blog and stuff like that, I was like, okay, this is at a stage where I actually really enjoy. We have a product that really works and solves real problems, and it's about scaling that. So there was a lot of things kind of came together in the sort of role that I was looking to find. So I applied to Mews, and my first interview with Mews was with one of our recruiters, obviously. And like within about 5 minutes, I was like, I have to work here. I have to work in this company. And every call I had after that just reinforced it. It was like, I have to work in this company.
And do you remember where did you first hear about Mews? Because you're based in Dublin.
Yes.
We don't have a strong presence in terms of clients. We don't have a team, or we didn't have a team back then. So where was it? I wonder.
I think I found it on LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure. And then from there, went down a rabbit hole of learning as much as I could about the company.
What about you, Ryan? Where did you learn about us? Was it us approaching you?
Yes, I think so. I think you approached me. So I'd obviously had a background in hospitality working for OpenTable, which I absolutely loved. I loved my time there, you know, and as I said before, in terms of the size of the company. And then I found Mews was a similar size, you know, rapid growth. And yeah, I just thought, you know, it's a kind of perfect fit for me. And then having the interviews with Pepper, our CTPO, I just noticed how open he was, you know, and I think that's also the culture that we have at Mews. Everyone is so open. They don't try and hide anything. And I just loved how he kind of came across. I read a lot in terms of the blog. And so everything that we do in the community, I think I said this to you recently. Most companies I've been to work for, if they didn't have a community, I would try and start one. So whether that's a blog and I would encourage my engineers to share and be open, even with like building software, like open source it and let other teams use it. So to see the open source software that we have, to see the blog post, to see the journey that we're on, you could just tell the openness, and that was just confirmed with the interview process. And yeah, I was kind of hooked from day one.
Was it similar to you? Did you mentioned you went to the rabbit hole. Is there maybe, and I'll maybe put you on the spot here, was there a specific topic that you saw and you were like, either, oh my God, they do it so bad, I want to fix it, or actually this is pretty cool, or was it kind of a general
That's a
feeling?
Great question. I'm not sure it's been intentional, but for the last few companies that I've worked in have seemed to get into this space of breaking down monoliths into a service-oriented architecture. And I've done it kind of 3 or 4 times now. I've made a lot of mistakes and I've done it the wrong way. And seeing that on the blog, like this is something we're going through. Okay, I've had a lot of experience doing that at OpenTable, you know, at GSK and at Salesforce. We went through that transition as well. It's a real hard problem. You know, everyone's talking about microservices and service-oriented architectures. It's really, really complex. So that was just another massive tick for me that like I've got a lot of experience in that. And the way that Pepper talked about it, and that it's very early in the journey. We are now at a point where we have 15 services, like within 1 year, that we've decoupled, and next year will be double or treble that. So I think being at the start of that journey was massively important for me.
Yeah, I think with me, it was during the interview process, like I was coming away from every call thinking, I've learned something there, and I could learn a lot more in that company. And again, the openness with which the people I spoke to communicated was amazing. But things like how you structure teams, how you do delivery planning, how you do roadmap planning. Even like at the time, we had a wacky thing called tertiles. We didn't plan in quarters, we planned in tertiles, which were 4 months. And you know, just stuff like that to me was so interesting. It was like, this company is doing it differently, and I want to learn how to do it differently, whether that's good, bad, or the same. I want to learn, and here's a place that I'm going to be able to learn.
And just to add to that, when I would speak to the leadership through the interview process, they were really interested in my experience. They would talk about perhaps a problem that they've had, say like, oh, how do you solve for this? What have you seen? And that's a big like differentiator for me. I knew I wasn't coming into a place where I was expected to assimilate and, you know, this is how it's done here. But it was very clear they were very open to, oh, maybe we should change this, or maybe there's something that we can improve. I was like, that's a big check for me.
And how are product engineers involved, for example, to cooperate with the platform engineers in breaking down the monolith? Because I know that some of our product engineers are speaking about it in meetups, write blog posts about how they in their team break down the monolith. So how involved are they?
Very involved. I mean, ultimately, the product teams have to be the ones doing it because they have to own that domain and they understand the domain. But there would be an interesting exercise in having a team come in and break down a monolith for you, but I don't think that could work particularly well because that team wouldn't understand the domain. They wouldn't understand the ins and the outs and the boundaries. So the product teams are the ones who have to do it, but they're supported, like incredible support from the platform team who are building the tooling, who are making sure that the new platform is capable of hosting the distributed architecture when we do break things down. But it's not a platform job to go and break down the monolith. It's a platform job to help the product teams break down the monolith.
How much more complex is the role of both of you actually and the teams? Because for many years from the very beginning, we were always Azure company, one cloud company, and through some acquisition that we've done recently, we became multi-cloud with AWS. So how does that impact your? We start with you, even though the teams that are reporting to you. So what does it bring to your job?
I think with every acquisition, we're trying to understand the maturity of their platform and kind of where they're at. But ultimately, we're trying to build a single unified platform because it benefits from economies of scale. We have a very high security posture. We have a very high bar for quality. We have a very high bar for our whole kind of platform. So long term with any acquisition we want this unified ecosystem essentially, because that's what we're trying to build with the product is an ecosystem. So we're trying to work very closely with them. It's not a case of make the acquisition, pick them up and move it. That's just not what we're going to do because it's not kind of productive. So it's a long-term plan. We need to understand the business and the context of it, but we're trying to build this single unified platform.
Yeah, in a way, it's almost like a North Star is a single unified platform. And that's what we should always be working towards because of the things that Ryan spoke about and the economies of scale. But it's inevitable that as we find great teams and great products, we will expand into multi-cloud like we have done. But that's a point in time as we move towards that North Star of a single platform. And it does for sure add complexity. Particularly when you're looking at not just the platform, but like the tech stack being very different. So, we're predominantly a .NET and a Microsoft house at Mews, but through various products that we've acquired and teams that have come into Mews, we also have, Ruby on Rails applications, Kotlin applications, and so on. So it's, it wouldn't work to just say, okay, tomorrow you're all .NET engineers, but we need to plan towards that. How do we unify?
Do we look at, I'm sure that the due diligence when we buy a company, and we actually bought quite a number of companies. When you get involved, is this something that concerns you when you see, for example, different stack or different cloud, or you're like, okay, we're gonna figure it out along with the way because the product is amazing?
I think that it's the latter. It's we'll figure it out. Of course, if we find a great product and it's using our stack, amazing. That makes things a little bit simpler. If we find a great product, a great team, and it's not, then that's just something we need to figure out and something we need to plan for and something that ultimately over time will solve. But it shouldn't and it doesn't deter us from bringing great products and people in. And
we're looking for great people, like you said. Like we went to Morocco, I think, earlier in the year for an acquisition, and it was just evident the team were exceptional. It was just so evident that they were exceptional that it didn't really matter. It made sense in terms of the strategy and what we were trying to do moving forward. But we are more interested, I think, in the people and do they want to learn? Do they want to grow? Do they want to get better? And I think it's been evident in the last few acquisitions that that's been the case.
I think in the engineering world, like we're all in it because we like solving complex problems, and multi-cloud, multi-tech stack, like they're complex problems to solve. So in a weird way, it's kind of a fun problem as well.
We talked about teams that are being kind of brought in from acquisitions. Maybe tell me. I don't talk about myself as us, but how big is your team right now, and how it's structured, and why?
Sure. So yeah, I'll start. I think in total we're about 200 people in product engineering, and the nomenclature we use is tribes. So a tribe is basically responsible for a large part of the product or an entire product itself. Within the tribe, then it breaks down further into teams, and teams own a subset of that functionality or a subset of that product domain. And then within the teams, in a lot of places, in a lot of cases, we have what we call squads, which are the kind of the smallest unit that we have, which is usually kind of 4 or 5 engineers who stick together and work together on solving like the actual kind of component level problems and challenges in the software. So the idea of ownership is kind of reinforced then at every step of that. So your squad owns literally the code and the components. The team owns an area of a product. The tribe owns a product, and then ultimately it's all product engineering.
Yeah, and on the platform side, so we have 3 tribes, which are kind of groups of teams. We have platform and security engineering. They're responsible for everything on the infrastructure in the cloud on Azure, as Conor said, and the security posture. So that's platform and security engineering. Then we have data. They're building the data architecture, the pipelines, everything that helps users make decisions with data, and also our customers make decisions. So they've almost got kind of internal customers and external, but that's data. And then we have, which I love, we have a developer experience tribe. And those folks are building tooling, trying to improve the processes, trying to improve the lives of product developers. And I think that's something quite special. It's something that's kind of growing in the tech community, and I think we're ahead of the times there. But the impact that tribe can have on making the product teams more productive, I think is a massive value add. But they're the 3 tribes within platform.
Now I forgot my question. Next question. And how many people is it, if you can?
About 70 to 80 people in platforms.
Okay, because earlier on, we were speaking about the size of the company, because I can imagine that in a smaller company, what you're doing would be owned ultimately by like product engineers, because they would be the ones working in Azure. Do you see that people maybe are missing the opportunity to be more close to the pipelines, to CI/CD? That people miss the fact that it's separated?
I think the answer is yes. But it's a yes with we're moving that direction. So a lot of what we're doing and a lot of kind of what will happen in 2025 and beyond is really fostering that, as Ryan said earlier, that kind of DevOps culture, and bringing that kind of operational side of the running the production runtime into the teams themselves. So a lot of what Ryan's teams are doing is enabling that future, enabling that world where the product engineering teams actually own from nuts to soup the work that they're doing.
So basically the directors being sort of CTOs of their own tribes, kind of taking care of the whole thing.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think as well, like if you think of you own your product, if there's an issue with it, whether it's with scaling or whatever it might be, it's the product team that have the most context of the users, the traffic. So it makes sense that they actually own it. It's a challenging journey because you may have product teams and engineers who've never ran their own infrastructure. They don't know how to debug issues or whatever. So there's a journey for us to mature, but it's how we scale our business. This separation of, you build the code and we operate it. It's just not a scalable solution. And it's not a solution that the product teams want. It's not something that they actually want. They're excited about this transition. You're right in your question, though. I mean, previous company I led product engineering, I led design, I led product management, I led platform, but there was 50 people. And so you get to a certain scale where there is this separation. And for that to be successful, it does need a good relationship. And I know we kind of joke back and forth with Conor, because in many ways we're very similar, but in many ways we're very different. But for us to build the type of organization which is the best one for our customers, we have to be very much on the same page, but also kind of challenging each other. So I think as you start to split and you have that separated role, you have to have strong leadership, I think, at our level that's very much aligned. But there's a healthy friction that you have to have in any high-performing team. And I think that's the reason I love working with Conor.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like healthy challenge, and there's a phrase that people in Ireland would use, and I don't know how well it translates, but we're very capable of tearing strips off each other, but we will always finish a conversation aligned, and we'll move forward with an aligned message together. And I think that's really, really important.
Give me some juice. So what is it that you really disagree on? That you maybe tell me like your last fight you had?
Oh, I don't know about fight. I think one thing that's good though is that I think it was earlier this week, and Conor just messaged, because I put a message into our leadership channel, and he said, "Hey, I'm not sure if you've kind of misunderstood that this is kind of what I said, but like this is not what I meant. Should we jump on we got on a call, we talked for an hour. I was like, oh, okay, we're totally on the kind of same page. Now, I could have said something, and obviously we're in a remote world and we're kind of async, and Conor could have kind of let that stew or misconstrued it or whatever. But the fact that he flags it and says, hey, let's have a conversation about this. Is this the right thing? He's like, oh yeah, cool. We're actually totally on the same page. You need that kind of relationship. And you don't get that from the start. But that's something that develops and grows. And I think we both give each other really candid feedback. Conor's very well aware of my gaps. And he'll highlight my gaps because he wants me to improve. And I do the same to him. So I think we both kind of learn from each other. And I think we get stronger in the areas that we kind of have gaps in. I think we complement each other pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I genuinely learn so much from working with Ryan pretty much on a daily basis. But things that are hard for me is to sometimes be patient, take a step back and think about the implications of what we're doing and how to change management in a way. It's not natural for me. My natural instinct is, we said we're doing this thing, let's do this thing, let's do it right now. And Ryan is very good at kind of calling me out on that, and we'll take a step back. And even though my natural instinct is like, Ryan, you're crazy, let's just do it, he'll hold me to a higher standard, and I think everybody benefits from that.
And a topic that's been here for 4 years or something is the remote work, because you both work very remotely. You both work from your homes, so you don't see your teams every day, and you don't see each other every day. So maybe tell me, how often do you talk? How often is a call in your calendar, or you don't have a calendar together and you just call each other? Like, how does it work with you?
I think all the time. We did have a weekly call, and we had a shared agenda, and I think the agendas, the topics are still there. There's like a ton of them, but we got to a point where we said, hey, like, it's actually better if we just jump on a call and talk to each other in real time. It's like definitely multiple times a week that we get on a call, we have a conversation, and I think it works better now. I don't know if you feel the same, but it works better now that, hey, let's just jump on a call and let's kind of discuss this topic. Because it's so important that we're well aligned. So I would say like at least three times a week, maybe. I think
definitely at least 3. And I actually think that's like a really big learning in terms of how we manage our time and our relationship. That has worked really, really well. Like, rather than having a formal, we have this one-to-one every week at this time, let's queue up our topics and talk about it then. That then means that even if we didn't have a topic to talk about, that time is now blocked in the calendar. Whereas now we free up time from the calendar, but we're much more responsive and able to ad hoc, let's just talk about this thing right now, because we haven't filled our calendar up with all of these kind of random or other one-to-ones that are just there as placeholders. So I think it adds a lot more kind of real-time ad hoc conversation that otherwise would just go into an agenda.
I think I can maybe give a good example as well and hold me to account. So Conor and I had a conversation, I want to say 6 months ago now. And he said, hey, I've got this challenge, right? And we kind of talked through it. Long story short, he ended up putting this weekly meeting in with his team where they said, like, what are we thankful for, right? What are we thankful for this week? It was almost like a gratitude meeting at the end of the week, which I think he called Sláinte.
Means cheers.
Which means cheers, Irish. Okay. And he's like, cool, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put it in. And anyway, he did it. He's like, it's amazing. Like, it's so good. Everyone has this and I think it's on a Friday, right? And it's like this end of week sense of gratitude within the team. It's like worked really well. And that came from like, hey, I've got this challenge. Like, what can we do? And then I've ended up stealing the idea. And I'm like, oh, cool, I'm going to do that. So now I have a Friday Sláinte with my team, which is a similar thing. I think that's just a good example of Conor actively reaching out, saying, here's a problem. We talked through it, came up with a solution, and then I stole the solution kind of off you. And I think that is a good representation of our kind of relationship.
Absolutely.
I'm still not getting enough, enough what I wanted to, but hopefully we'll get there. And maybe we'll get there now, because you mentioned change management. And one thing that was in my mind when we were talking about how our teams work is that we've introduced recently missions, right? That's kind of another layer on top of what we do. So what is mission in our sense, and how it went, let's say, the kickoff and how we continue working with it?
Maybe it's, if I start with like, what was the problem that we were trying to solve? And it's a very common problem for any scaling business. When you're a small startup it's very easy for a team to come together around a piece of work, whether it's a feature or whatever it might be, and get it delivered. As you start to get to 300, 400, 500 people, how work happens can become very siloed across teams, right? So if you think of a feature might require this person from this team, this person from this team, and then you end up taking a long time to deliver it because you end up with either tickets between teams and it doesn't flow, the delivery doesn't flow. So what we try to do is step back and say, how do we solve this dependency problem? Multiple companies, you can solve this kind of multiple ways, whether it's kind of matrix organizations or whatever. So we looked at the problem. We said, right, this is a problem. How do we solve it? And we said, well, why don't we form projects or missions that we would call them, kind of long 3+ month pieces of work. We will form dedicated teams around that work. So you would grab 2 people from this team, 2 people from this team, and then they would work dedicated on that thing until the delivery was done as a single unit. So that's what we called a mission. And then we rolled that out across R&D, right, where we said, right, this is the work that's going to get done. You now decide who are the right people to work on that mission. And then we kind of rolled that out holistically across all of R&D.
Yeah.
Missed anything?
No, I mean, you didn't get to the part where it caused a lot of pain for people.
You'll be the one saying that,
I
okay?
teed that up for you. You can deliver that news.
Because that's what we talked, right? You're the nice guy, you're the
There
bad
we go.
guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though he had first the gratitude call, so that tells me he's a
That's
good
true, but it was
guy.
his idea. So, but yeah, I mean, we came up with this idea, and in theory, like a lot of the principles, I still think got this should solve the problem, and then we just rolled it out. It was like, okay, from April, everybody's working this way. Let's just go, as opposed to actually taking it a little bit slower, communicating it more, taking more feedback in advance, making sure we didn't just kind of force it on people, but actually bring people on the journey. And we really, in retrospect, I think we really missed the trick there. We didn't take people on the journey. We just said, this is it, go. And over the months that kind of followed, we tweaked things here and there, but there was feedback, quite loud feedback about things that weren't working. And I don't think we did a good enough job at really understanding why those things weren't working and seeing what we could do to address those as we go. We addressed the things that didn't work for us. So there were certain things around the visibility of work and things like that was painful for us, and we addressed that. And we addressed some feedback for other people, but we didn't really take a holistic, what's causing the most pain? Why is that causing the most pain? And iterate through it that way. So, yeah, I think that was a big lesson in change management in terms of, like, you can't just go. You have to bring people on the journey.
And we eventually did, right? So we eventually had an offsite where we had a big retrospective on missions, like what works, what doesn't, what are the problems, what are the challenges. So we did that after 12 months. I think the learning for us was we could have done it either at 3 months or we could have piloted it with a few teams. So we eventually kind of got there, and the learning is, like, going forward, this is a challenge, I think, as well, when you're a fast-moving growth company, this balance between moving at speed and bringing everyone on the journey. We want to make sure that we're moving at pace, but the people are number one. The people have to be number one, and we have to bring them on that change journey with us. So I think that was probably the biggest learning for us, I think, as a leadership team this year.
So this is the biggest learning. What is the second biggest learning, if there is any, of this year, let's say?
I think there's also something about the frequency of communication as well. And I think it also comes to change management. There's a brilliant book by Patrick Lencioni, who wrote the 5 Dysfunctions book. And he talks about what strong leadership is. There's kind of 4 parts to it, which I won't go through all of them. But one is kind of clarity of communication, essentially like over-communicating. And I believe there's been some research that says it's about 9 times of different kind of formats before people actually get it. And I think that's the thing as a leader. You might go into an all hands and say, well, I've communicated this announcement, but then there's half the people weren't at the meeting, or, some people are on holiday. You have to over communicate that message in different channels, in different forms. And I think that's the thing that we've learned as a leadership team. Just because we've announced something, it's not enough, right? I think we need to make sure that we over-communicate the message to bring clarity to the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, on a maybe slightly different topic, we're far from perfect at Mews. We're getting better all the time. And so in terms of learnings, like we've had some issues this year, for example, with, some of our biggest customers started to see performance degradation in the product as we onboarded bigger properties, more rooms and things like that. And so we've had occasions where, to the customer, the product just doesn't seem to work at all. And what's amazing about Mews is how people come together and rally around those problems, like really roll the sleeves up, rally around it and get the result for the customer, get that thing over the line. And it's another one of those weird ones. It's a really nice experience to work in an environment where when things go wrong, the people will really pull together like that. But then it's after that, again, the kind of retrospective, okay, why did it go wrong? What could we have done differently to stop that going wrong in the first place? And what would we need to do to prevent that thing from happening again? And where are the other blind spots for us as an organization or within the product? And then seeing those improvements start to kind of come to life in the teams. And even, as recently as I'd say the last couple of weeks, you start to see things happening in the teams that are addressing those performance concerns or those blind spots without anybody prompting them. The teams are really taking that ownership on themselves and really learning from the things that have caused us pain, which is just it's a fantastic environment.
And you said that, now we talked about the learnings, let's say. Let's talk about a little bit more on successes. And my first question before we kind of talk about some of the biggest ones, how do you measure the success? Or how does the business ask you to measure the success? Because it's still very abstract, I think, for the rest of the company, like what engineering actually does. Mainly, I guess, for you, with you, people actually see what your teams have delivered. But how do you measure success?
There's a lot of metrics that we use, so I think from a platform perspective, we are constantly tracking things like uptime, which is obviously a key one for the platform. We had a 6-month period during this year where it was 100%, which is extraordinary to have 100% kind of uptime. So there's metrics like that. I think what people often miss, though, is the qualitative. So we do like engagement surveys and things like that. It's the people that I think that matter as well, particularly as a leader. So I'm constantly looking at the platform metrics and engagement and things like that. But I also think it's the qualitative. Are you seeing your teams give each other feedback? Are you seeing them grow? I think as a leader, I over-index probably more on those things. Like, am I building a strong leadership team? Is my team stronger than it was last year? So I take account of the qualitative probably equally to the metrics that we track on a monthly basis.
But you can't really put it into the table.
You can, but
yeah.
But yeah, and we do engagement surveys and things like that. So like we try and measure not just the platform, but the people, the growth, the strength of the team. Things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. On some of the metrics, it's true. It is maybe a little bit easier on the product engineering side of things because it's so customer facing, and you can see the outcomes of the work that we do, right? So whether that's waiters and waitresses are getting 180% bump in tips, right? That's amazing. But there's also the things that are maybe less sexy in a way, right? Like, what pain do customers have with the product? And one of the things I'm really proud of this year is like how we've responded to when a customer has an issue and they raise that issue, how quickly it will get resolved and how many of those issues there are. And the metrics around that, what we call customer raised defects, have been dramatically improved this year. And that's an amazing thing to witness as well, because it shows that we really care about the experience that our customers are having. We're not just churning out features or churning out software, we're actually making sure that the quality of life for our customers is better. So they're the sort of metrics that I get really excited about.
You both mentioned that you come from hospitality background in a sense. Do you think it's necessary for an engineer in hospitality business to have hospitality experience before? Or is it okay to gain it during?
Oh, I absolutely think it's okay to gain it during. Like, we would reduce our talent pool, our access to talent dramatically if it was you must be coming from a hospitality background. You will learn at Mews a lot about hospitality, because it's not a case of you're just going to build widget X and widget Y and move on. You're going to deeply understand the problem. You're going to deeply understand the guest and the customer. All of our teams spend time working with the support teams. All of our teams travel as part of working in a remote company. They travel and they'll spend time on site with customers, so they will gain that knowledge. Of course, if you come in with it, it's an advantage. Of course it is, but I wouldn't say it's a necessity.
And how do you incentivize teams traveling to the customers? Because I'm sure it can be intimidating, mainly for some more introverted engineers or people.
I think part of it is making it as accessible a thing to do as possible. So like playbooks and blueprints on, okay, if you go to visit a customer, here's a list of very friendly customers that we've worked with before. And here's the sort of exercises you should do with them. And here's the sort of questions that you should ask. And kind of trying to take as much of the unknown out of it as possible to make it a more comfortable experience. But I think the other thing that is hard to convey up front is the sense of, the sense of achievement when you actually sit down and see the work that you're doing having an impact on the customer in real time. And that can get addictive. So, there's almost a network effect then, right, of an engineer spends time with a customer, they have a great experience, and they're going to tell the engineer next to them about that great experience. They're going to have a great experience. So it kind of self-perpetuates then.
When you travel, do you always try to stay in a Mews hotel in the city?
Yes, absolutely. Always try to stay in the Mews hotel.
Will you use all the features that it offers? Kiosk, will you use the online check-in? And will you be like, when it doesn't work, you're like, why it doesn't work? And would you go to the receptionist?
Yes, we always try and dog food, like the features that we have, new features coming out. So yeah, I think like pretty much every time we travel, we're always trying to stay in one of our customer hotels.
Well, I always book my parking spot in Prague through Mews because it's kind of our customer, our parking.
Yeah.
So I'm using that. You mentioned that it can be addictive to see how your customers are using it, but I think you have an experience of it being, because you've done that in your previous jobs where you were looking at people using your product, and I think it can get both addictive and it can get both like scary. Yeah,
I mean, I have some wild experiences over the years. In one job, I was building sales systems, billing systems, and things like that for. It was a telco company, but I was sitting out developing in real time with people on the phones around me using my software. And it was amazing because you would hear something not working. You could just fix it and ship it. And then, that was very, very addictive. But I've also, in that environment, deleted an entire customer table and brought the entire business to a halt. At which point I had to take my laptop and go and lock myself in a room while I tried and fix it. So that was maybe the more daunting side of it.
One other thing I'd like to raise, because that's I don't know if it's an elephant in the room, but it's every time I speak to someone, there is in engineering, it's technical debt. It exists. Mews has 12 years of software engineering. So what is your not vision, but what is your take on technical debt? What does it mean to you, and how do you solve it?
I mean, every company has technical debt, and I think of it like, we've all got debt, right? If you've got a mortgage or if you've got a car on loan, all of us have some level of debt. Debt in itself isn't bad until it is. And I think that's the key thing, is like, what is the impact of the debt? And it's like quality, it's kind of amorphous. It's kind of abstract in a sense. So we try and not necessarily just talk about technical debt, but like, what is the impact on the customer? How does it slow us down? How do we prioritize the things that we fix? And we try and go a little bit deeper on what those things look like. I think a big part of improving our quality and our technical debt posture is our modernization. So looking at building our new products on Atlas, which Atlas is our new platform that we're building. As we try and break down the monolith, we're moving on to this kind of new platform that we call Atlas. But we're also trying to fix our house, today. So we're always constantly trying to ensure that teams have some allocation within their work time to improve their systems, rather than just kind of continue to accrue any debt. Is there any other things, Conor, in terms of your teams, what they do?
I think it's interesting to look at product development as, like, we are in the business of creating technical debt. Like, today's feature, today's code is tomorrow's debt, and it's inevitable, and it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. As Ryan said, like, the key is focusing on the right prioritization of technical debt and where the technical debt can really hurt us, and being deliberate about that, accepting that some of it, we're not going to resolve this because it's not going to be a problem for 5 years. And this thing, we are going to resolve it because that's going to be a problem tomorrow. So, like, we should accept that it's inevitable we create technical debt, but how we tackle it is really important.
And we are trying to build, and this is another good thing I think about Conor, is that we're trying to build an environment of product-focused engineering. Our job as engineers is not to write code. Our job as engineers is to solve customer problems. So if we could do that without writing any code, we would do that, right? So we're always trying to encourage the teams. Your job is not to code. Your job is to solve problems and think about how I do that in a scalable way, in a resilient way. And again, if that was to buy a piece of software or externalize it, and that's the right thing to do, then that's what we should do.
And maybe tell me, and I'm going to jump off very, very quickly from technical debt because I think you kind of explained it very nicely. Three things that you were really excited about this year, and one thing you're excited about 2025. And don't talk about your personal lives.
Don't talk about our personal lives.
No, we may get to that. But in Mews, in engineering, in R&D, what are the three things that you really, really like? Then maybe you can go one by one if you don't have them in your head right now.
So things in Mews in 2024. I can't not talk about the modernization of the platform, so I'll maybe start with an easy one. But the fact that we've we've built 15 new services on this new platform, it's a significant impact to the business. So we've laid a huge amount of foundations. I would say maybe the second one, if we're not going one by one, I think is the acquisitions that we've made as we drive towards more of this kind of ecosystem play. And we've made these acquisitions and built a lot of our own products. I think that's massively exciting. And then I'll hand over to you while I think of the third one.
I'm glad because I was going to use the acquisition one. You did me dirty there. For me, it's kind of on the people side of it. And that's multifaceted. But like, we have people in very senior leadership roles in engineering who started life as an engineer in Mews. Our CPTO actually, started in Mews
part-time student.
Yeah, and seeing that happen in a company is fantastic. So one of the directors of engineering in my team, was an engineering manager a few months ago, and before that was an engineer. And seeing that, that opportunity for people to learn and grow and step up and really take those challenges and run with them is phenomenal.
And I think, and I'm sorry I step into that, but I think you mentioned that it's getting really more and more difficult to. No, it's a better word, but it's we are more.
The bar is going up all the time, and maybe that's the kind of second part of the people side of it as well. We've just brought some incredible talent into Mews as well, and the sort of talent that we're able to attract to Mews is it's world class talent, And so when you bring in world class talent, the bar has risen. So when you're doing that and people internally are stepping up to meet that bar, we're just constantly getting better and better. So to see those promotions, and I think about 10%, maybe more than 10% of people in engineering were promoted this year, even though the bar is going up. That's an amazing feeling.
I'll say maybe coming back to my third one, it probably has to be security. So we've invested massively in improving our security posture. So we've done things like we now have Sneak, which is kind of static and dynamic security scanning in our pipeline. So every time an engineer writes a piece of code, it goes through our CI/CD pipelines and we scan it. We do security scanning. So that's a kind of really big win. And then the other one is we have a bug bounty program. So we actually pay hackers, white hat ethical hackers, and if they can find a vulnerability or so on, we essentially pay them. And I think that's such a kind of creative way. And we have penetration testing and all those other things. But we've made massive advances in our security posture this year, and it's been a huge effort. I'm super proud of the work that those folks have done.
I was reflecting on this the other day. When I joined Mews, a few months after I joined, we had our internal conference for R&D, so our R&D Con, which was an amazing event. But at that event, I stood up on stage and I told a story about what the experience would be like for a customer and for a guest in the future, the potential far-off future of Mews. And I got off the stage and I was buzzing because it was a very exciting story. And I spoke to a few people that's amazing, but that's a stretch. That's a long way from where we are. And this year, I stood on a stage in April at our external conference Unfold, and I told the same story, but it was real. Bringing to life those stories. And this one was kind of nice as well because it had a heavy reliance on AI, which was so unknown.
I think 55th minute we get to AI.
Do I win a bet?
Last time it was 50 minutes.
But from talking about that, 2 years ago to seeing it come to life and seeing that technology, which is still so early days and so not well understood, to see our teams take that challenge and bring it to life was really incredible.
And so what about 2025? What do you look for?
Oh, there's so many. I would, if I had to pick one, I'd probably say Atomize. So we made a recent acquisition of a revenue management system, and moving away from just being a property management system to expanding that to the back office, right? So the folks in finance that run the properties. That's massively exciting, not least because the product is amazing. What Atomize has built is fantastic, but the future opportunities we can do to kind of connect it with our property management system, and it's that kind of ecosystem play where 1 + 1 = 3. We can add massive value to our customers, and the things that we can do with AI there in terms of kind of forecasting, I think is going to be kind of next level, and no other company is doing this.
Yeah, I think I would actually just build on that as well, because next year we already have 3 major new products lined up that will launch in the first half of next year. Many people work their entire careers and don't get to launch a new product. We're going to do 3 of them in the first half of next year, which is just incredible. One of them being around the Atomize product and revenue management, but also another acquisition that we did earlier this year. Our event management capability is going to launch next year. And so seeing, from Ryan and I did the due diligence on that this time last year, seeing that come to life inside of Mews and seeing that we're going to launch that to market next year is so exciting. Plus other in-house new build products that we're going to launch next year, including a whole new business intelligence product, is super exciting. So the sugar rush that we're going to get early next year
and there's loads more.
Yeah,
there's loads more.
Well, we'll tell you about that. But so I didn't really get any fight, so I need to open that Pandora box. And who's a better runner? Who's a faster runner?
It depends on the distance.
Okay. So let's do No, but you both are really avid runners, right?
Yeah, we both did a marathon this year. So I did a trail marathon. Just I'm going to highlight the word trail there. It's a bit more difficult.
Hilly.
Exactly. But it was amazing. I loved it. That was in Kielder, which is in the north of England, and you did Dublin?
I did Dublin, yeah. Faster than you did.
You did it fast, yeah, but I had higher elevation, so it was a trail marathon.
And I think 5K, you would win.
5K, he smokes me.
Yeah. So if you put together how many 8 5Ks plus 2Ks, exactly. You beat him in the marathon. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming over to Prague. Thank you for coming to the podcast, and thank you everybody for listening. So see you at the next episode.
Thank you. Thanks
Amazing.
for having us.
Thank you.
Cheers.
As always, I have some gifts for my visitors.
Thank you very much.
It's Christmas season, which you can see obviously on Ryan's jumper. We had an agreement to come in the Christmas jumper. If it was yesterday, there would be a Christmas jumper, but there's none. But I have a little something for you. So this is a very typical Czech thing, and I know that you are not Czech, so I thought it would be nice. So this is for your Christmas tree ornaments, but it's actually chocolate. I wouldn't say it's the best chocolate, but definitely better than the English pudding that you eat for Christmas. So we're almost at the holiday season. So what are your plans, and what is the movie that you're looking forward to the most?
I'm going to do absolutely nothing but eat lots of food. So I've got 2 kids, 6 and 4, I think, as you know, and I'm just going to spend time with them. I'm going to switch off for 2 whole weeks. You will switch off for 2 weeks? Yeah, 2 whole weeks. I'm going to switch off. I'm going to spend time with the kids. And the movie will be Home Alone. They've already watched it about 10 times already in the build up to Christmas. So I think that would be 1 or 2 is your. It's got to be 1. Yeah, it's got to be the original. Yeah. I mean, New York is also fun, but it is good. But the first one's better.
Nice.
Conor.
Well, you can see I'm actually really into Christmas. And a little known fact about me is I wear a different Christmas jumper every single day in December.
Since August.
Well, it's a very known fact to me when having calls with Conor.
But I'm really looking forward to Christmas. Like Ryan, I've got 2 daughters. Mine are 10. I have twin girls. And they're so hyped about Santa Claus coming. So the magic of Christmas in my house is just incredible. I love it so much. And Christmas Day is it's my favorite day of the year. Early in the morning, we're going to get up, we're going to see what Santa left. Then I'm going to go with the kids to my parents' house. I'm going to bring a nice bottle of whiskey. myself, my dad, and my brother are going to sample a really nice whiskey. Then we'll go and we'll eat. Well, I eat a lot of food, and apparently now I'm going to eat some chocolates off the tree, which I'm really excited about. And then on the TV, it's got to be Die Hard. Got to be Die Hard.
Well, enjoy the Christmas, and I know that you are a big fan of whiskey. So I don't know if there is Czech whiskey. I don't know if you've
There is.
There is.
Oh
okay.
yeah. At the very first time I came to Prague, I made sure I tried some Czech whiskey, and I enjoyed it.
Thank you for being polite. All right. See you at a time.
Thank you.
Thank you.